Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We always get so excited to geek out about new ideas with you all, and judging from your requests, today's deep dive into unlocking your leadership potential is going to be a good one.
And we've got a great resource for this deep dive, a book called Fundamentals of Executive Leadership Coaching. It's full of really great insights and practical techniques that I think can help anyone step up their leadership game.
Okay, see, practical techniques, that's like my love language. But before we get lost in the weeds with all the tactics, can you give us the high-level overview? Like, what's the core message of this book? What's it all about?
Yeah, so at its heart, this book really pushes the idea that leadership, it's not some like innate talent that you're either born with or you're not. It's a skill set, it's a journey, and anyone who's willing to put in the work can become a more effective leader. And they use a really interesting metaphor throughout the book, the hero's journey.
Ooh, I like where this is going. It's giving very much those epic tales that, we see in movies and books and everything. What does that actually look like, though, in like a leadership context?
So think about it, like every hero starts out somewhere, right? Like
Uh,
somewhere ordinary. They're not born amazing. They face challenges, they stumble, they doubt themselves sometimes. But it's through those trials, those mistakes, that they develop the strength and the resilience and honestly even the compassion to become a true leader. And that's exactly what this book, I think, encourages, like embrace the messy journey, the challenging journey of
yeah.
leadership.
It's way more relatable than just this like perfect, always in control leader, that's for sure. But okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. Let's talk about those practical techniques that you mentioned. What are some of the tools or the frameworks that this book offers to like help us on our own leadership quests?
So one that really stood out to me, and I actually think it's going to be super useful for our listeners, is this concept called the Relationship Vista. It's basically this really cool visual mapping technique that helps you understand all the like dynamics that are at play in your work relationships.
Wait, hold on. A visual map?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have my attention. I'm a very visual person.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
Okay, so picture this. You're standing in the center of a room, right? And this room, this represents your mental landscape, so like your relationship vista. Now think about all the different people you work with, your boss, maybe your colleagues, your direct reports, if you have those, and just visualize where they are in this room in relation to you. So are they like close by or are they far away? Are they in front of you, behind you, off to the side, above you, below you, eye level?
Okay. I'm starting to see how this could be really insightful. I'm already like picturing certain colleagues that are just like right here with me, like side by side. And then others, well, let's just say they feel a bit more distant.
Yes, exactly. And the book argues that those like spatial relationships, they're not random, right? They reflect these often unconscious dynamics that are happening in our interactions all the time.
This is already blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm holding up a mirror to my own perceptions of my work relationships, which is kind of scary, honestly. But then, like, what do we do with that information once we have it? Because it's one thing to have those, like, aha moments where you're like, oh, that's interesting. But then what?
Oh, for sure. There are definitely those light bulb moments, when you start to see those patterns emerge. But the real power of this relationship vista, it's not just about understanding like the current state of your relationships. It's about actually shaping them. So the book, it kind of gives you guidance on how to interpret those spatial relationships and then, like, most importantly, how to make adjustments to improve those dynamics.
Okay, I am very, very hooked. I feel like we need to dedicate some serious time to unpack this whole relationship vista thing because I have so many questions. But before we dive into that, were there any other, like, key takeaways from the book that you think our listeners would find valuable?
Absolutely. The book goes into a lot of detail about other really important aspects of leadership, like understanding the different types of power, navigating change effectively, and then aligning your leadership style with your own personal values.
Oh, man, I am already feeling overwhelmed in the best way possible. There's so much to unpack here.
Don't worry, we're going to break it all down. I mean, this book really is like a treasure chest of leadership wisdom, and, we're here to help you find those gems that'll be most valuable for your journey.
Okay, so we've got this incredible tool, this relationship vista that we are definitely going to unpack in detail. But you mentioned some other really valuable concepts from the book, like understanding different types of power. And that sounds like a rabbit hole I am ready to dive right into.
Right. It's super fascinating. And, the book definitely doesn't shy away from the fact that, like, power dynamics, they exist in, like, every workplace. But it goes beyond just acknowledging that they're there and actually gives you a framework for understanding, the different ways that power shows up and how you can, like, leverage it effectively.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word power, they immediately think of it negatively,
Mm.
Like it's something that you use to like control other people or manipulate them. So how does the book address that like potential pitfall?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And the book really emphasizes that power in and of itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's like, it's a tool, right?
Yeah.
And just like any tool, it can be used constructively or destructively. So one of the frameworks they introduce is this thing called the 5 bases of social power, which was developed by French and Raven.
Okay, the 5 bases power. Let's break it down. What are we talking about here?
So you've got coercive power, which is basically the ability to punish or, withhold rewards.
Yeah.
Then there's reward power, which is kind of the classic like carrot and stick approach. Legitimate power, which comes from like your formal position or your title within an organization.
Mm.
And then you have referent power, which is all about the influence that you gain through respect, admiration, the relationships you build.
Okay, so it's like referent power is that cool kid that everyone wants to be friends with, whereas legitimate power is more like the hall monitor that everyone has to obey, even if they don't actually like them that much.
Yeah, a perfect way to put it. And then the 5th base is expert power, which comes from your, knowledge, your skills, your expertise in a particular area.
So like, if I'm the only one who knows how to fix the coffee machine, I hold all the power. Good to know. But no, seriously, I mean, this framework is actually really helpful for understanding those different ways that people can like influence others in the workplace.
Yeah.
Are there any that the book kind of highlights as being particularly like effective, or on the flip side, ones that can kind of backfire if you're not careful?
Yeah, for sure. So the book argues that while all 5 bases of power can be effective, it really depends on the situation. But the most sustainable and I think positive forms of power are referent power and expert power, because those are the ones that are based on trust and respect and, the genuine value that you bring to the table.
That makes a lot of sense. No one really wants to feel like they're being coerced or manipulated all the time. And if you're just relying on your title to get things done, I mean, you're not really building any true influence that way. But how does all of this tie back to like becoming a better leader?
That's a great question. I think it really comes down to being aware of, first of all, what your own power bases are, and then how you are actually using them. So like, are you leveraging your expertise to, empower other people? Or are you using it to make them feel, I don't know, kind of inferior? Are you building relationships that are based on like mutual respect? Or are you relying on your position to just get your way?
It's like a self-awareness check-in. I like it. One thing that tends to trip people up, especially in leadership roles, is this whole idea of dealing with change. And I know the book talks about that as well. What are some of the like key insights there?
Yeah, so the book actually frames change as like an inevitable part of, any leader's journey. And it even uses a model that I think a lot of us might recognize, which is the Kubler-Ross model.
Wait, the Kubler-Ross model, you mean the stages of grief? Like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Are you saying I go through that every time my company changes, like project management software?
Well, okay, maybe not to that extreme, but the book does make a really interesting point, which is that, the stages of grief aren't just for like major losses in our lives, right? They can actually apply to any kind of significant transition, even those that happen, at work. So when we're faced with a big change, even if that change is ultimately a positive one, there's often a period of adjustment where we might experience some of those stages.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, as a leader, you don't really have the luxury of like getting stuck in denial or anger, do you?
Exactly. And that's why the book kind of stresses the importance of understanding those stages, both for yourself, but then also for your team. Because if you can like recognize the signs of maybe resistance, or if someone's frustrated, you can actually support your team way better through those transitions.
So it's not just about managing like the logistics of change, but also that emotional landscape that comes with it, which is huge. Okay, so we've talked about understanding our power bases. We've talked about navigating change. I'm sensing a theme here. This book really is all about understanding those like hidden forces that are at play in our work lives, isn't it?
Totally. And one of the most powerful yet often overlooked forces is the role of like our personal values in shaping our leadership style.
Ooh, values. That's a
Yeah.
big one. And something I definitely want to dive into more because I think it's so easy to get caught up in what we think our values should be rather than what they actually are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's where the book comes in with like some really, really valuable tools. So it actually guides you through this whole process of uncovering like what your core values are, how to identify any potential like conflicts, and then even how to start aligning your actions with those values so that you can create, a more fulfilling and more impactful leadership experience.
This is all gold. Okay, so we've talked about understanding our power bases. We've talked about navigating change. We've talked about aligning our actions with our values. But I know we still have this like super powerful visual mapping tool up our sleeves, this Relationship Vista thing. And I think it's high time we gave it the attention it deserves. Okay, the moment has arrived. We've been teasing it long enough, and I am ready. I'm like reeling up my sleeves here, ready to dive into this whole Relationship Vista technique. So walk me through it. How do I actually create this map? I need the step by step.
It's actually pretty simple, although I will say, like any powerful tool, the more, thoughtfully you use it, the more you're going to get out of it. So just imagine like you're standing in the center of a room, right? And this room, this is your relationship vista. So it's kind of like your mental landscape of all those work connections. So now think about all the different people that you interact with on a regular basis. So it could be your boss, it could be your teammates, those colleagues that you maybe, clash with a little bit more, or even direct reports if you have those. And just kind of place them in the room wherever feels intuitively right.
Okay, so there are no wrong answers here. Right? I'm just going with my gut on where did these people land in my mental space?
Exactly. Yeah. Trust those instincts. Are they close to you? Are they far away? Are they kind of like ahead of you, behind you, off to the side? Are they up high, down low, at eye level? It's all good data.
You know what? It's funny as I'm actually doing this in my head, I'm realizing the colleagues that I collaborate with really easily, they're all clustered pretty close by. And then this one colleague in particular that I always seem to butt heads with.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're practically in the next county over. I'm not even kidding.
That is amazing. And that is precisely the kind of insight that this tool can give you, right? Because we talk about good vibes or oh, I feel out of sync with this person, but this is a way to make it, tangible and really visualize it.
Okay, say I've done the thing, right?
Yeah.
I've mapped out my relationship vista and maybe I'm seeing some patterns, maybe I'm seeing some, red flags here. What then? It's a one thing to recognize those dynamics, but
Yeah.
how do you actually use that knowledge to make things better?
Yeah, so that is where it gets even more interesting. So the book, it actually gives you all these guidelines on how to interpret, what those positions mean. So for example, if you have someone who's consistently behind you in your relationship vista, that might represent, I don't know, a feeling that you need to protect them. Or, conversely, if you have someone who's kind of towering above you, that might signal some intimidation that you're carrying, maybe even subconsciously.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm not just identifying potential issues here, but I'm actually starting to understand those root causes, those subtle power dynamics that honestly I might not even realize are affecting how I'm interacting with people on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly, yeah. But here's the coolest part, right? It's not a static map. So let's
Yeah.
say you want to improve your dynamic with that, looming boss we were just talking about. You can actually mentally experiment with that. So what if you were to shift them slightly further away or maybe bring them down to eye level and just kind of notice how that impacts how you're feeling?
Whoa, it's like I'm actually rewiring my perception of that relationship just by changing the mental scenery.
In a way you are, yeah. And what's really cool is that even making those small adjustments in your relationship vista, it can have this ripple effect on how you actually approach those interactions in the real world.
Okay, this is amazing. This is going straight into my leadership toolbox for sure. But before we wrap up completely, I kind of want to circle back to that hero's journey metaphor one last time. Because we talked about it at the beginning and I think it's such a powerful idea. How can our listeners really take that idea and use it in their own pursuit of becoming more effective leaders?
It's such a great point to end on because I think what it does is it reminds us that leadership is not about reaching some perfect destination where you've got it all figured out. It really is about embracing the bumps along the way. You know what I mean? So just the hero in those stories, they face those trials and they emerge stronger on the other side. So every challenge that you overcome as a leader, every mistake that you make, every moment of self-doubt, honestly, it's all contributing to your growth.
It's not about being this flawless superhero leader. It's about embracing the journey with all of its messiness and everything.
Exactly. And the book does such a great job of like really emphasizing this, that the most valuable lessons that we learn often come from those moments when we're kind of pushed outside of our comfort zone a little bit
Yeah.
and we're forced to, I don't know, dig deep and find these new reserves of strength or resilience or compassion. And to me, like that's the heart of the hero's journey.
I love that. That is such a more realistic and I think ultimately a more inspiring way to kind of view leadership as a whole. So for our listeners who are ready to, embark on their own hero's journey here, what's one key takeaway that they can like start applying today?
I would say start with mapping out your own relationship vista. Like just that act alone of becoming aware of some of those like unconscious dynamics that are at play, I think that can be incredibly transformative. You might be surprised at what you discover. You might uncover some hidden patterns that have been, holding you back in certain ways, or you might just like unlock a whole new level of understanding and connection with the people that you're working with.
That is such great advice. And remember, everyone listening will be sure to have a link to Fundamentals of Executive Leadership Coaching in the show notes so you can, grab a copy for yourself and really explore all these concepts even further. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we will catch you next time as we explore even more fascinating ideas together.